All right. So we're in here. And this is Trump and the G, guys. Trump and the G is the Tennessee Three doomed? That's the question. So the past couple of weeks, the Tennessee Three, Justin Pearson, Justin Jones, and Gloria Johnson, three members of the Tennessee State House, have generated a lot of noise. They protested in the Tennessee State House, which they call the Well, and they brought protesters in. They used bullhorns and disrupted the proceedings of the Tennessee State House. And from what I understand, they've been doing it for a while, being disruptive and not quite that disruptive, but being disruptive and to no avail. They wouldn't stop. And on a particular day, a couple weeks ago, they basically were very disruptive, brought protesters in, which disrupted the entire proceedings. And hearings pursued later on that resulted in Justin Pearson and Justin Jones being kicked out, being expelled, while Gloria Johnson was not, who happened to be white, and the other two guys happened to be black. So that generated a public firestorm. They're protesting over, gun violence in the state of Tennessee, which is kudos to them. They're trying to bring awareness to a serious issue, but maybe how they went about it that's creating angst in the state of Tennessee about protesting and being disruptive. There was a mass shooting in Tennessee at a school where 6 people died, and some of the members of the Tennessee Three have also talked about gun violence in general, where their own people close to them have died. So it's an issue that's becoming more and more part of the public conversation. I was talking about this back in the 80s when I was in college. When we were hearing about a lot of gun violence in South Central LA, where a lot of black youth were dying from these high-powered weapons and these killing machines, and now they're becoming more normalized throughout the country, and people getting shot all over the place. So the question is what to do about it. Just like I predicted last week that the two guys, the two members of the Tennessee Three, have been reinstated. They've also got a lot of publicity. They've gotten publicity, praise from President Biden, former President Obama, the Vice President Kamala Harris, the corporate media. It led to to traditional, with respect, crimes about racism, and that's like slavery, and that's like Jim Crow, when they kicked the two black guys out and didn't kick the white lady out. That's racist. So you can't hardly get people over this racism angle, that all they know is racism. And it's something that's no hanging fruit for a lot of people in the corporate media. They always talk about race and slavery and Jim Crow. And these guys got a lot of publicity. They gone on press run. They were Good Morning America last week. So here's Justin Pearson giving a sermon after he was reinstated. So I'm going to try to share my screen. To the well. I believe in a division. People that ostracized coming to the well. Yeah. See, I see white folk and black folk. I see queer folk and straight folk. I see rich folk and poor folk coming from the block to the well of Atlantic justice right now. Not tomorrow, but right now. Justice right now. It is this movement. Right now. That's gonna change this country. It's this movement in this moment in time that's gonna change the country. And I'm so glad. Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, I'm glad. Oh, I'm glad. Yes, I'm glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. I'm so glad. It is a Okay, so then you saw his sermon where he sounded like a Southern Baptist preacher. And there's also a video online when he was in college a few years ago where he sounded like a regular college student. Now he's trying to take on the cadence of a Southern Baptist preacher, which I would call Reverend Porkchop, where you can, this sort of image of a black preacher who hasn't necessarily been to the divinity school, but he knows how to move the crowd. I can walk the walk, and I'm going to talk the talk. And a lot of, speaking in this cadence that gets people riled up and get people happy and excited, emotional, and shouting. And so in this sermon, he said that this movement, whatever this movement, he didn't really define what this movement was, didn't really define it. I thought the issue was gun control and, or taking these killing machines off the street in the state of Tennessee and protecting the public, which is what his constituents are calling for. But he called it this movement. He didn't really say what this movement was. He said it's going to change the country. He didn't say how it was going to change the country, when it's going to change the country, but this movement is going to change the country. And I'm so glad. What is he glad about? I have no idea. Is he glad about being, being reinstated to the Tennessee State House, which was probably going to happen anyway? He's glad about the publicity he's getting? Is he glad about everybody cheering him on and getting excited and getting everybody in a lather? We don't know what he's glad about because he hasn't really accomplished much of what he talked about when he was protesting about getting these killing machines off the street. So they checked off all the boxes. The Tennessee Three. They've gotten people excited. They've gotten this conversations about, that's racist, and talked about how racist people in Tennessee are and how racist the Tennessee State House is. And that's like slavery, and that's like Jim Crow. So they checked off all the boxes. Now it's time for some actual policy, which is what they were charged to do. As a citizen, I can go down there and protest. Public can go down there and protest and holler and scream about what needs to be done. Lawmakers are saying what we need to do is this, and protesting and hollering and screaming, getting bullhorns and having sermons about, I'm so glad, and this movement is going to change the country. That's the equivalent of Michael Jordan and Larry Bird, when, they said the Bulls are down by 20 points with 10 minutes left. Michael Jordan looking at everybody going, we need to do something. That's what they're paying Michael Jordan $30 million to do. That's why they pay him the big bucks. That's why he's Michael Jordan. That's why these guys don't shoot. That's what they pay Larry Bird to do. To figure out how they're going to overcome this deficit. That's why they pay the big bucks. That's why they pay Reggie Jackson the big bucks. That's why they call him Mr. October. Because he always comes through in the clutch. So now it's time to come through with some policy. Lawmakers are there to set policy and to propose laws and hopefully get those laws passed for the benefit of their constituents. Now it's time to propose policy and set policy. So the performance, we've had enough of the performance. The Reverend Porkchop routine. Now it's time for some results. You got the afro and the dashiki and the cadence of the Southern black preacher. Now it's time to deliver some results. Okay, so the first thing is legally, what they're really arguing about, I don't know if they know this, is a public nuisance claim. That these proliferation of guns are causing a public nuisance and could potentially should be taken off the street because they call them public nuisance. This argument's been had by gun activists and by the NRA. They had this debate in court decades ago, and the gun manufacturers won. Similar to the so-called opiate crisis, where lawmakers were saying we need to take these opiates off the market because the proliferation of opiates is causing people to get high. Apparently. The supply of opiates and these doctors, these opiate manufacturers are inducing doctors to write opiate prescriptions, which is causing people to take opiates and OD. And so about a year ago, we had a segment on Trump and the GE. Myself, Tony Mitchell, Dr. Jay Joshi, and William Amarquine, the pharmacist, and we parsed through the so-called opiate crisis and the legalities of it and this concept of public nuisance. So I'm going to try to share my screen about what this public nuisance claim is and why it likely won't be approved in the courts. So I'm going to try to share my screen with you. Trump put on the gauntlet for the opiate epidemic in 2017 and said that the proliferation of opiate pills coincided with opiate with drug overdose deaths. So they made the connection. And so he said these big pharma companies were going to pay for their role in the opiate crisis, and that led off a bunch of lawsuits. And then in 2019, there was multi-district that created a mechanism to settle these cases, a novel settlement mechanism where they could make sure that the money would go where the harm occurred with the municipalities and the cities. Then in 2020, Trump actually settled with Purdue Pharma right before the election. There were a few test cases in 2019 with Oklahoma and a few counties in Ohio. The lawsuits in Ohio never went to trial because they were settled, and the lawsuits in Oklahoma were settled too, except for Johnson & Johnson, which went to court, and the judge actually ruled against Johnson & Johnson, said they created a public nuisance with all these pills being distributed in Oklahoma. So those were the first two test cases, and then in this past summer there was actually a global settlement between Johnson & Johnson, McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, with about 42 states. It was about $26 billion global settlement. And then the other development was that last month, California ruled that opium manufacturers could not be held liable for a public nuisance claim because there's no evidence to support that they actually, the manufacturers actually induced doctors to inappropriately prescribe opiates. And you also couldn't tell how many people OD'd on prescription opiates versus opiates on the black market. Then within a couple of weeks, the state Supreme Court of Oklahoma overturned the previous ruling from the lower court where Judge Thad Balkman had ruled against Johnson & Johnson. State Supreme Court overturned that and said that Thad Balkman erred in how he interpreted the public nuisance claim. And you couldn't accuse a manufacturer of public nuisance, and that they couldn't be held liable for how someone used or misused their products after they produced it. And so things are I think that was a lot of demarcation. So I think it may have gotten people off this narrative that opiate manufacturers caused doctors to inappropriately prescribe opiates to pain patients who became addicted and eventually OD'd or turned to heroin or the black market after they were cut off by doctors. So that changed the narrative.
Okay, so that's the description of the sort of called public nuisance claim. And I think that that's the first step with the lawmakers in Tennessee to alert their constituents, the Tennessee Three, to alert their constituents that there's probably no legal basis for taking guns off the street due to any public nuisance claim. I spoke to someone a couple of days ago who said that there used to be, I'm not sure how true this is, there used to be, you used to get a semi-automatic weapon or an automatic weapon. You used to have go to the feds to do that, but they changed the law. So maybe that may be one thing, to get an automatic weapon like a AK-47 or one of these high-powered military type weapons to make it a fair requirement to get them. Why do you need a weapon like that if you're not in the military? That may be one avenue. The other thing, I don't know how you can get the gun. Other than that, I'm not sure how you can get the guns off the street. Because if people want to get access to guns and they are, legally licensed to carry, how can you keep them from getting a license and getting a gun? The other thing is, why there's so many mass shootings going on to begin with, and why there's so many drug overdose deaths. If you look at the financial crisis, the government prints $30 trillion and gives it to Obama's donors or somebody he wants to sleep with. And gives it everybody but black folks and poor people. The financial crisis, one of the first worst financial crises since the Great Depression. That's probably one thing driving it. The other thing is, how can these people come up with better policies locally and nationally that people won't want to go grab guns and shoot up places, and people won't want to get high and risk, or take drugs on the black market and risk overdosing. That's the other question. At some point, the lawmakers have to. I'm not saying the Tennessee Three, but the lawmakers who've been behind these bad policies over the past decade need to be held accountable. And what are we going to do about it as a nation? You can't have the lawmakers hiding behind the opium manufacturers and the gun manufacturers. You have to have, the so-called leaders. Where's the leadership? These bad policies that's weighing on the public. They're making certain policy to help, very small segment of society at the expense of the hundreds of millions of Americans. So why are people? I predicted this years ago that there was going to be social unrest, and it's happening just like I predicted in my book Shock Exchange. So the other question is, what are our leaders going to do about all this? What's driving the mass shootings? What's driving it just can't be racism and slavery every 2 seconds. What's driving the mass shootings? What's driving the drug overdose deaths? The U.S. is in pain. A lot of Americans in pain, and they don't run hedge funds or private equity firms. They don't work on Wall Street. That those are the industries the government more have been, or tech companies the government has been supporting and printing money and giving to these people in those industries over the past decade. And if you're not part of those industries, then you're sort of left out in the cold, in my opinion. But that's basically what's ahead for the Tennessee Three, unless they set policy and clearly explain these policies, what the policy is, and how they're going to move forward to deal with the mass shootings. Then they're pretty much doomed, and just another group that's putting on a performance. If I want to see a performance, I can go to a rap concert. I can watch an NBA basketball game or a football game or a baseball game. I don't need lawmakers putting on a performance and telling me how glad they are and putting on a Reverend Pork Chop routine. But that's Trump and the GE. Is the Tennessee Three doomed? Thank you for listening. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.